Africa.com is hosting a virtual International Women's Day event on Tuesday. It is aimed at equipping women CEOs with the necessary artificial intelligence skills. The organization will host over 60 women. To unpack this, I'm joined now by Africa.com Chair and Executive Editor Teresa Clarke. Teresa, good afternoon. Thank you for joining me. So what exactly will you be doing with the 60 women, some of them leaders and captains of industry, around the issue of artificial intelligence on Tuesday?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me join you today. It's my privilege to talk with you about this. We are so excited because artificial intelligence is changing the way business is done. And so the conversation that we're having on Tuesday is equipping the women CEOs of Africa, those who appear on the Africa.com definitive list of CEOs. And that means women who run big business, listed companies that have revenue over $100 million. We want to make sure that they understand the latest trends in artificial intelligence that are taking place around the world. And we want to make sure that they understand what kind of change is necessary in their companies, how to manage change. We're not teaching them AI per se. They all have people who work with them, who have those sorts of technical skills, but it requires and demands different things from leaders. AI scales the ability to do work. It changes workflows. It changes the competition. New things are coming around the corner. And so from a business perspective, it's important to understand what is happening so that you can prepare your organization and your leadership to accommodate.
And part of the framing that you've chosen is to say what women CEOs need to know about AI. It's an interesting way of framing it, in that, to me, it suggests that there are certain nuances that have to do with being an African CEO who is a woman, and then within the context of AI. It's not just simply that, you know, what CEOs need to know about AI. So just tell me about that interesting dynamic. Why did you choose to frame it in that way?
Yes. Well, in honor of Women's Day, one of the things that we want to do is look at some of the biases that exist in AI, because so much of the coding in AI it's done by humans. And so the thinking pattern that AI adopts is the thinking pattern of the people who program AI. And so, for example, we're going to be starting with a panel on bias that says, yes, that algorithm is biased. And we'll be looking at, for example, facial recognition technology, which has largely been coded by white males. And as a result, the way the algorithms work do not identify Black women. And so we have a presentation that's just fascinating about how AI can't recognize very famous Black women faces as being female. It recognizes them as male. And that includes Oprah Winfrey, Serena Williams, Michelle Obama. The AI thinks that they're all men. So we want to make sure that the women CEOs, that's just one small example, understand that you cannot take it all without a grain of salt, and that women need to be involved, women need to understand AI, and women need to have a seat at the table so that the algorithms being produced, and Black women in particular, represent those underrepresented groups of women and Blacks, so that AI learns as we think as well.
Perfect. Actually, that's what I had in mind when I asked you that question. Teresa, lastly then, how would the conversation around AI and AI itself feature in the situation where we are grappling with inequality, not only in terms of the bias of the algorithm, but also in terms of representation of women at executive level? In our own country here in South Africa, we're talking about 5% or so women being CEOs of the Johannesburg Stock Exchange listed companies. Is there space therein for AI and conversations about AI to address those issues? Or I've just been trying to grapple with it to say, how would you then fit that conversation in that context?
Absolutely. Well, this is being done in connection with our second annual Africa.com definitive list of women CEOs, which is sponsored by Standard Bank. They've been a fantastic partner in supporting this work. And one of the things that we're doing is identifying these women because they've never been identified as a collective. And so in doing so, this year we're actually going, last year the list had 50 women on it. This year it has 74. We have very strict criteria. It's data-driven, using data provided by Bloomberg. We look at all the public companies and see what women are running them. And I think that a big part of changing that pipeline is for people first to understand data. It's hard to change anything if you don't know what you're working with. And so we're taking the first step by looking at the data. The second step is training. We are also doing a fantastic, I'm just thrilled about it, with the power of technology and distance learning. We held a large training session for women in the first 5 years of their corporate careers to help equip them and get them off on the right start. And so using distance learning to do that with Harvard University is really impactful.
Right, Teresa, I'm completely out of time. I've got to thank you for your time and your inputs here on eNCA. That's Teresa Clarke, who is Chair and Executive Editor of Africa.com.